The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of Westminster Abbey, casting golden patterns across the ancient stone floors. William stood near the altar, his military uniform perfectly pressed, his posture rigid with the weight of duty that had been placed upon his shoulders since birth. He had attended countless royal events, met thousands of people, and mastered the art of the polite smile that revealed nothing of what lay beneath. Yet today felt different somehow, though he could not explain why. Kate arrived with her family, her heart pounding beneath the elegant dress she had chosen so carefully. She had no royal blood, no title, no ancestry that traced back to kings and queens. She was simply a young woman who had grown up in a loving middle-class home, where Sunday dinners were loud and warm, and nobody worried about which fork to use first. Her mother had squeezed her hand before they entered, whispering words of encouragement that now seemed to fade as she stepped into the grandeur of the Abbey. The ceremony was beautiful, filled with hymns and prayers that echoed off the vaulted ceilings. Kate found herself stealing glances toward the front where William stood. She noticed how his jaw tightened during certain parts of the service, how his eyes seemed distant even as he appeared fully present. There was something lonely about him, she thought, despite being surrounded by so many people, or perhaps because of it. When the service ended, guests mingled in the Abbey's reception hall. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead, and waiters moved silently with silver trays of champagne. Kate felt out of place among the titled guests who spoke in hushed, refined tones about matters she barely understood. She found herself near a window, pretending to admire the view of the gardens outside, when she sensed someone approaching. William had noticed her during the ceremony. Something about the way she carried herself, neither trying too hard to fit in nor appearing uncomfortable with who she was, had caught his attention. He had watched her listening to the service with genuine interest, not the practiced expression of polite boredom he saw on so many faces at these events. Now, finding himself near the same window, he took a chance he rarely allowed himself. Their eyes met for the first time then, not across a crowded room as stories often claimed, but simply, naturally, as two people drawn to the same quiet corner of a noisy gathering. For William, it was like stepping out of a role he had been playing his entire life. In Kate's gaze, he saw no calculation, no ambition, no awareness of his title. She simply saw him, the man beneath the crown he would one day wear. Kate felt the moment stretch and deepen. She had heard about William all her life, seen his photograph in newspapers and magazines, but nothing had prepared her for the reality of standing before him. His eyes were kind but guarded, as though he had learned to protect something precious within himself. She wanted to say something meaningful, something that would acknowledge this strange, unexpected connection, but words seemed inadequate. William spoke first, his voice lower and warmer than she had imagined. He asked about her impressions of the service, a simple question that opened a door between them. Kate answered honestly, sharing her thoughts without pretense or flattery. They talked about architecture, about history, about the weight of tradition and the challenge of honoring the past while living in the present. Around them, the reception continued. People laughed and conversed, glasses clinked, and the string quartet played softly in the corner. But for these two, the noise faded into background whisper. They discovered shared interests, similar values, and a humor that surprised them both. William found himself laughing genuinely, not the polite chuckle he had perfected for public occasions, but real laughter that came from somewhere deep within. Time passed differently in that corner by the window. What might have been minutes felt both longer and shorter than any measure could capture. Kate forgot about feeling out of place. William forgot about the duties waiting for him, the schedule that governed every moment of his life, the expectations that never ceased. They were simply two people discovering each other, drawn together by something neither could name but both recognized. When an aide appeared at William's elbow with a discreet cough, reminding him of his next obligation, the spell broke gently. William hesitated, something he rarely did. Rules and protocol dictated that he should simply excuse himself and move on. Royal life demanded constant motion, never lingering too long with any one person, always aware of appearances and proprieties. Yet he found himself reluctant to leave this conversation unfinished. Kate saw the conflict in his expression and understood it instinctively. She smiled, a genuine smile that reached her eyes, and told him she hoped they might speak again someday. It was a simple statement carrying no pressure or expectation, yet it acknowledged what had passed between them. William nodded, committing her face to memory, knowing that this moment, however brief, had shifted something fundamental within him. As they parted ways, both carried the encounter with them. William moved through the rest of the reception with his usual grace, but his mind wandered back to the window, to the young woman who had seen him rather than his title. Kate rejoined her family, answering their questions about her conversation with distracted responses, still feeling the warmth of connection that had surprised her so completely. Neither of them knew then how this first meeting would unfold into something larger than themselves, a love story that would captivate millions and challenge centuries of royal tradition. They only knew that something had begun, something that felt both fragile and unshakable, like the first green shoot pushing through winter ground, determined to reach toward the light. The months following that first meeting proved challenging for William in ways he had not anticipated. He found himself thinking about Kate at unexpected moments during official functions and private quiet hours alike. His life had been carefully planned since childhood, every aspect designed to prepare him for the crown he would inherit. Personal desires had always taken a distant second place to duty, and he had accepted this without question. Until now, Kate returned to her normal life, but normal no longer felt quite the same. She went to work, met friends for coffee, attended family gatherings, yet part of her mind remained in that moment by the window at Westminster Abbey. She told herself not to be foolish, that nothing could come of a single conversation with someone so far removed from her world. Yet the memory persisted, warm and real, refusing to fade as she thought it should. Fate, or perhaps something more deliberate, brought them together again at another event several weeks later. This time it was a charity gala, and Kate had been invited by a friend who worked with the organization. She almost declined, uncertain whether she wanted to risk the complicated feelings another encounter might bring, but something stronger than caution prompted her to accept, to wear her best dress and step once more into a world that was not quite hers. William saw her as soon as she entered the ballroom. He had been listening to a diplomat discuss trade relations with strained patience when Kate appeared in the doorway, looking both confident and slightly uncertain. Without thinking, he excused himself mid-conversation, something his handlers would later gently scold him for, and made his way across the room. Protocol demanded he greet the senior guests first, but protocol suddenly seemed less important than reaching her before she disappeared into the crowd. They picked up their conversation as though no time had passed, as though they had been friends for years rather than acquaintances who had spoken once before. Kate made William laugh again. Her observations about the elaborate floral arrangements and the somewhat pompous speeches delivered with a warmth that took the edge off any criticism. William shared stories from his recent travels, finding himself more honest than he usually allowed, dropping the careful diplomacy that colored most of his public words. As the evening progressed, they found themselves drawn to the terrace, where the night air provided relief from the crowded ballroom. The city lights sparkled below them, and music drifted through the open doors behind them. They talked about dreams and fears, about the pressure of expectations and the desire to live authentically. William spoke of the weight of his destiny, how sometimes he felt more symbol than person. Kate listened without pity or false sympathy, understanding that everyone carried burdens invisible to others. Kate shared her own struggles with finding purpose and meaning in life, the pressure to choose the right path when so many options existed. She spoke of her close family, how they had always encouraged her to pursue her own happiness while instilling strong values about service and responsibility. William envied that freedom, even as he recognized that his own constrained path also carried privileges beyond measure. The connection between them deepened that night. It was no longer just attraction or curiosity, but something more substantial. They recognized in each other a kindred spirit, someone who understood the complexity of balancing personal desire with responsibility to others. The differences in their circumstances seemed less important than the fundamental compatibility of their characters and values. When the evening ended, William asked if he might call her. It was a simple question but loaded with implication. To say yes meant opening a door to possibilities that Kate knew would complicate her life beyond measure. To date a royal meant surrendering privacy, inviting scrutiny, becoming public property in ways she could barely imagine. Yet looking into his eyes, seeing the hope and vulnerability there, She could not bring herself to say no. Their courtship began quietly, carefully. William could not simply show up at her door with flowers like any other young man. Every meeting required planning, security considerations, strategies to avoid the press that followed his every move. They met in private homes belonging to trusted friends, went for walks in the countryside far from London, found moments of normalcy in a situation that was anything but normal. Kate discovered that dating William meant sharing him with the entire nation. He belonged to his country in ways that transcended personal choice. Duties called him away without warning. Important matters demanded his attention at inconvenient times. She learned to be patient, to understand that canceled plans and interrupted conversations were not signs of disinterest, but simply the reality of his position. William found in Kate something he had never expected to find. She did not fawn over his status or try to change herself to fit some imagined ideal of what a royal companion should be. She challenged him, made him think differently, and treated him with a casual affection that felt revolutionary after a lifetime of formal deference. With her, he could be William rather than Prince William, a distinction that meant everything. Their relationship grew despite the obstacles. They learned each other's rhythms, discovered how to communicate across the gulf of their different experiences, and built trust slowly and carefully. Kate met his family, navigating those encounters with a grace that surprised even herself. She did not try too hard to impress, nor did she shrink from being herself. William's family, particularly those who knew him best, saw how he relaxed in her presence, how he smiled more readily and seemed more fully himself. Yet the world beyond their private moments grew increasingly curious. Rumors began to circulate, whispers at social events, speculation in gossip columns. Someone had seen them together. A photograph had been taken, blurry and from a distance but unmistakable. The press, always hungry for royal news, began to piece together the story of the prince and the commoner. Preparing to transform their private romance into public spectacle, Kate felt the first tremors of what was coming. A photographer followed her to work one morning. Friends called with warnings that reporters had been asking questions. Her family received strange phone calls. The life she had known began to slip away, replaced by something more complicated and demanding. She had known this would happen, had tried to prepare herself, but the reality proved more intense than any anticipation. William watched Kate navigate these early intrusions with growing concern and admiration. He knew what was coming far better than she could, understood that once the press fully focused on her, life would never be the same. He worried that the weight of public attention would drive her away, that she would decide the cost of loving him was simply too high. The thought of losing her created an ache in his chest he had never experienced before, making him realize just how deeply she had become essential to his happiness. The morning Kate woke to find photographers camped outside her apartment, she knew her old life had truly ended. They shouted questions as she left for work, cameras clicking in a constant aggressive rhythm. Her photograph appeared in newspapers with headlines speculating about her relationship with William, analyzing her clothes, her background, her family, her education. Strangers who had never met her felt entitled to opinions about whether she was suitable for a prince. William felt helpless watching from within the protective bubble of royal security. He could issue statements through his press office, but words on paper could not shield Kate from the daily assault of attention. His handlers advised patience, suggesting that public interest would eventually settle into something more manageable. But William knew the truth. If their relationship continued, if it deepened into something permanent, the scrutiny would only intensify. Kate discovered reserves of strength she had not known she possessed. She held her head high walking past the photographers. She declined to answer their intrusive questions. She continued working, seeing friends living her life as normally as possible under abnormal circumstances. Her family rallied around her, her parents offering unwavering support, even as they struggled to understand this bizarre new reality their daughter had entered. There were moments when Kate questioned whether love could be worth this price. Late at night, reading cruel comments about herself online, seeing unflattering photographs chosen deliberately to make her look awkward or unattractive, she wondered if she should simply walk away, save herself the pain, return to privacy, Let William find someone born into this world who already understood its rules and demands. It would be easier, cleaner, kinder to them both. But then William would call, his voice warm and concerned, asking how she was really doing beneath the brave face she showed the world. Or they would steal a few hours together away from cameras and crowds, and she would remember why she had chosen this difficult path. In his presence, the noise and chaos faded. They talked and laughed, argued and made up, shared silences comfortable and complete. She loved him, simply and entirely, and that love made the difficulties bearable. William proposed on a quiet evening, just the two of them in a place that held meaning for them both. There was no grand gesture, no audience, no photographers waiting to capture the moment. He told her that she had changed his life, that she made him better, that he could not imagine his future without her in it. He promised to protect her as best he could from the storms that would come, knowing even as he spoke that his protection would never be enough against the full force of public attention. Kate said yes with tears in her eyes, joy and fear mixing in equal measure. She knew what this decision meant, understood that she was agreeing not just to marry William, but to join an ancient institution with traditions and expectations that sometimes seemed designed for a different century. She would have to give up her career, her privacy, her freedom to make simple choices without considering their public implications. Yet looking at William, seeing the love and hope in his eyes, she knew she was making the right choice. The engagement announcement created a media frenzy beyond anything Kate had yet experienced. Her photograph appeared on front pages worldwide. Television specials dissected every aspect of her life. Fashion magazines analyzed her style. Historians debated the significance of a commoner marrying so close to the throne. Public opinion divided between those who celebrated the romantic story and those who questioned whether she was truly ready for the role she would have to play. Kate began intensive preparation for her new life. She learned about royal protocol, the complex web of rules governing everything from how to address different members of the family to the proper way to exit a car while wearing a dress. She studied the history of the institution she was joining, the triumphs and tragedies of those who had worn the crown before. She met with advisors who coached her on public speaking, media interaction, and the careful balance between warmth and formality required of royals. The transformation required was profound. Kate had to learn to be constantly aware of her expression, knowing that cameras might capture any moment and photographs could be analyzed endlessly. She had to develop the ability to make small talk with strangers while revealing nothing substantive about herself or her opinions. She had to accept that she would be criticized no matter what choices she made. That perfection was expected yet impossible to achieve. William watched Kate navigate this demanding preparation with growing admiration and guilt. He had been born into this life, had never known anything different, but Kate was choosing it willingly out of love for him. The sacrifice she was making humbled him. He tried to support her through the difficult adjustments, to be present when she felt overwhelmed, to remind her that beneath all the ceremony and protocol, their love remained the foundation on which everything else rested. There were setbacks and struggles. Kate made mistakes as anyone would, small breaches of protocol that were magnified by press coverage. She struggled with the loss of spontaneity, the inability to go shopping or meet a friend for lunch without elaborate security arrangements. She missed her old life more than she had expected. The freedom to be anonymous, to make mistakes without consequence, to be judged for her character rather than her appearance or her ability to wave properly. But there were also moments of unexpected joy. Kate discovered that royal life offered unique opportunities for meaningful service. She began to understand how she might use her platform to draw attention to causes she cared about, to make a difference in ways that had never been possible in her previous life. She found satisfaction in the work, in meeting people whose lives she could touch, in learning that duty could be deeply rewarding when approached with genuine commitment. The wedding planning consumed months of intensive work. Every detail mattered, from the guest list that balanced diplomatic necessity with personal preference to the route of the carriage procession through London streets. Kate had input into the decisions, but always within parameters defined by tradition and expectation. It was her wedding, yet not entirely hers, a reality that captured the essential paradox of her new life. William did his best to ensure Kate's voice was heard in the planning, that the day would reflect their love story, and not simply serve as royal pageantry. They chose music that meant something to them personally. They invited friends from their lives before royalty entered the picture. They planned moments of intimacy within the grand public ceremony, knowing that millions would watch but hoping to preserve something sacred and private at the heart of the spectacle. As the wedding date approached, Kate experienced a complex mix of emotions. Excitement at marrying the man she loved competed with anxiety about the enormity of what she was stepping into. She would become a public figure for the rest of her life, would raise her children under intense scrutiny, would never again know the simple privacy most people took for granted. Yet when doubt threatened to overwhelm her, she thought of William, of their love, and found the courage to move forward. The night before the wedding, Kate stayed with her family in a hotel, traditional separation from William, before they joined their lives officially. Her mother sat with her late into the evening, talking about marriage, duty, love, and sacrifice. Her father held her hand, telling her how proud he was of the woman she had become. Her siblings made her laugh with affectionate teasing, reminding her that no matter what title she gained tomorrow, she would always be simply their sister, loved without condition or ceremony. The morning of the wedding arrived with unusual sunshine, as though the weather itself had decided to cooperate with the historic occasion. Kate woke early, her stomach tight with nerves and anticipation. In a few hours, she would walk down the aisle at Westminster Abbey, watched by millions around the world, and emerge transformed into a member of the royal family. The young woman who had once stood awkwardly by a window at a reception would become a duchess, a future queen consort, a symbol as much as a person. William rose in his own quarters, surrounded by family and close friends who had gathered to support him through this momentous day. He felt the weight of history pressing down, aware that he was continuing a tradition stretching back centuries, that his ancestors had stood where he would stand, making vows that bound together personal love and public duty. Yet beneath the formal significance, he simply felt like a man about to marry the woman he loved, nervous and eager in equal measure. Kate's preparation took hours, teams of people working to create the perfect appearance for cameras that would capture every angle, every moment. Her dress, kept secret until this morning, fit beautifully, elegant, and timeless. Her hair was styled simply, but perfectly. Her makeup enhanced her natural beauty without dramatic transformation. Looking in the mirror, she barely recognized herself, yet somehow still felt like herself underneath all the careful presentation. The drive to Westminster Abbey took Kate through streets lined with thousands of people who had camped overnight to catch a glimpse of the royal procession. She waved to the crowds, amazed by their enthusiasm, touched by the genuine warmth and celebration she saw on so many faces. These were ordinary people who had taken time from their lives to witness this moment, to be part of something larger than themselves, and their presence made the day feel less isolating, more connected to real human joy. Inside the abbey, William waited at the altar with his brother beside him. The ancient building filled with guests, a mixture of royalty from around the world, political leaders, celebrities, and friends of the couple. The organ played, its deep notes resonating through the space. William's hands were steady, but his heart raced. He had faced many challenging moments in his life, but nothing compared to the anticipation of seeing Kate walk through those doors toward him. When Kate appeared at the entrance with her father, the sight took William's breath away. She looked radiant, moving with a grace that seemed effortless despite the train of her dress and the weight of the veil. Their eyes met across the length of the abbey, and in that moment, the crowds and cameras and ceremony all faded. There was only Kate walking toward him, choosing him, offering him her life and trust and love. The ceremony itself passed in a blur of hymns and prayers, vows and blessings. Kate's voice remained steady as she spoke her promises, though inside she trembled with the magnitude of what she was doing. William's responses rang clear and certain, his love evident in every word. When they exchanged rings, their hands touched with a tenderness that the formal setting could not diminish. They were not just performing a ritual, but genuinely pledging themselves to each other for whatever lay ahead. The moment came when they were pronounced husband and wife. William looked at Kate with such undisguised love that it seemed to soften the formal grandeur of their surroundings. He leaned in to kiss her, a brief and proper kiss suitable for public viewing, yet carrying within it all the depth of feeling that words could not express. The Abbey erupted in applause, and Kate felt tears prick her eyes, overwhelmed by joy and relief and the surreal realization that she had actually done this impossible thing. The procession from the Abbey to Buckingham Palace took them through streets packed with celebrating crowds. Kate waved until her arm ached, amazed by the sea of faces, the flags and banners, the sheer scale of public happiness surrounding their marriage. William held her hand inside the carriage, squeezing gently, reminding her that beneath all the spectacle, this was fundamentally about them, about two people who had found each other and chosen to build a life together. At Buckingham Palace, they stepped onto the famous balcony, where generations of royals had appeared before them. The crowds below roared their approval. William and Kate waved, smiled, and then, in response to the crowd's chanting, kissed again. It was a more relaxed kiss this time. Both of them swept up in the celebration, aware that they were creating a moment that would be replayed and remembered for years to come. The reception that followed offered the first real privacy of the day, though privacy was relative when surrounded by hundreds of guests. Kate finally relaxed slightly, the formal ceremony complete, the public obligations fulfilled for the moment. She talked with guests who had traveled from around the world, accepted congratulations from people she was meeting for the first time, and tried to memorize details of a day that was passing too quickly to fully absorb. William stayed close to Kate throughout the reception, attuned to any sign that she might be overwhelmed. He introduced her to relatives and dignitaries, smoothly guiding conversations, protecting her from anyone who might be too demanding or intrusive. His family had fully embraced Kate by now, recognizing the positive influence she had on William, seeing how she complimented and strengthened him in ways that boded well for their future roles. The speeches that evening were warm, and sometimes funny, friends and family sharing stories that humanized the couple beyond their public images. William's brother spoke with affection and humor about growing up together, about William's journey to find love, about the remarkable woman who had captured his brother's heart. Kate's father spoke with emotion barely held in check, talking about his daughter's character, her strength, her capacity for love and commitment. When William and Kate finally had a moment alone late in the evening, they stood together looking out at the darkened gardens, processing the enormity of the day. They had crossed a threshold together, transformed from private individuals into public figures bound by duty and tradition. Yet holding hands in the quiet darkness, they were simply William and Kate, husband and wife, facing an uncertain future with the certainty of their love. The days following the wedding brought a brief respite from public life. William and Kate traveled to a private location for their honeymoon, a precious stretch of time when they could simply be together without constant observation. They talked about the wedding, laughing over small mishaps that no one else had noticed, marveling at the surreal nature of the experience. They made love with a freedom impossible in London, knowing no photographers lurked outside, no duties called them away. But the honeymoon ended, as honeymoons must, and they returned to London to begin their married life in earnest. Kate moved into the royal residence, bringing her few personal possessions into spaces filled with history and formality. She worked to make their private quarters feel like home, adding touches of warmth and personality to rooms that had housed royals for generations. William helped where he could, both of them trying to create a sanctuary within the larger institution. Kate's new role began to take shape. She received training in the specific duties expected of her, the charity work, the public appearances, the delicate balance of being visible without overshadowing others or drawing inappropriate attention. She made mistakes, as anyone would, but learned from them with a determination that impressed even skeptical observers. She was not trying to be perfect, but rather to be genuinely useful, to find ways to make a positive difference through her position. The question of children arose almost immediately, public curiosity about heirs mixing uncomfortably with private decisions about family planning. Kate felt the pressure of expectation, understanding that producing children, particularly sons, was viewed by some as her primary duty. Yet she and William were determined to approach parenthood on their own timeline, when they felt ready rather than when protocol suggested they should be. Years passed, bringing both challenges and joys that transformed William and Kate from newlyweds into a mature couple, deeply rooted in their shared life. Kate had mastered the art of royal duty, finding her own voice and purpose within the constraints of tradition. She championed causes close to her heart, focusing particularly on early childhood development and mental health awareness. Her work was substantive rather than merely ceremonial, and the public responded warmly to her genuine commitment and approachable manner. Children arrived, bringing with them a new dimension to Kate's understanding of what she had taken on. Raising royal children meant balancing normal parenting desires with security concerns and public interest. She wanted her children to have as much normalcy as possible, to know the kind of warm family life she had experienced growing up, yet understood they would never truly be private citizens. Every milestone would be photographed, every school choice analyzed, every friendship scrutinized. William proved to be a devoted father, determined that his children would grow up feeling loved and valued for themselves rather than their titles. He and Kate worked together to create stability and warmth within their household, family time protected as much as possible from the demands of duty. They read bedtime stories, helped with homework, attended school events, trying to give their children the gift of a relatively normal childhood, despite extraordinary circumstances. The relationship between William and Kate deepened through shared experience and mutual support. They had learned each other's strengths and weaknesses, developed patterns of communication that worked for them, found ways to support each other through difficulties. Kate had grown more confident in her role, no longer the nervous newcomer but a respected member of the royal family. William relied on her judgment, valued her perspective, and found in her a true partner in every sense. Yet their path was not without difficulties. The press remained relentlessly interested in every aspect of their lives, sometimes kind, sometimes cruel, always intrusive. Family relationships within the royal household occasionally grew complicated, different priorities and perspectives creating tensions that required patience and diplomacy to navigate. The weight of duty could feel crushing at times, the endless obligations leaving little space for personal desires or spontaneous choices. Kate sometimes felt the loss of her old life more acutely than she expected. She missed being able to go for a walk without security, to make a quick trip to the store, to be anonymous in a crowd. She missed the freedom to speak her mind without every word being analyzed for political implications. She missed being known for herself, rather than for her titles and her position. These losses were real, even though they had been chosen. And working through grief for the life not lived required emotional honesty that royal life did not always accommodate. William understood these struggles better than anyone, having wrestled with his own complicated feelings about his predetermined destiny throughout his life. He had found ways to carve out meaning and purpose within the constraints, but he knew the sacrifices were real. Together they talked through difficult moments, reminding each other why they had chosen this path, what they hoped to accomplish, how their love made even the hardest parts worthwhile. The public watched their marriage with fascination, projecting onto them fantasies of perfect romance. The reality was more complex and more real than any fairy tale. William and Kate argued sometimes, grew frustrated with each other, struggled with the everyday challenges of marriage and parenting like any couple. But they had built something solid and lasting, a partnership based on genuine respect, shared values, and deep affection that had only grown stronger through testing. Kate's relationship with the British people evolved over time. Initial skepticism from some quarters had largely given way to appreciation for her dedication and authenticity. She had not tried to reinvent the role of royal spouse, but rather brought her own personality and priorities to it in ways that felt fresh without being revolutionary. People appreciated that she seemed genuinely interested in the causes she championed, that her emotions appeared real rather than performed, that she balanced dignity with warmth. The couple took on more significant responsibilities as they matured into their roles. They represented the royal family on international tours, managed increasingly complex charitable portfolios, and began preparing for the even greater duties that would one day be theirs. Kate had proven herself capable of handling high-pressure situations with grace, whether meeting world leaders or comforting grieving families after tragedies. She had found her strength and learned to trust it. William watched Kate's growth with pride and gratitude. She had come so far from the uncertain young woman who had stood by a window at Westminster Abbey. She had taken enormous risks for love, had faced challenges that would have broken someone less resilient, had transformed herself while somehow remaining essentially herself. He knew that when his time came to wear the crown, Kate would be an extraordinary queen consort, bringing to that ancient role a modern sensibility and a genuine heart. Their love story had become part of the nation's story, a narrative of transformation and commitment that resonated across generations and social classes. Young people saw in them a model of partnership and mutual support. Older generations appreciated their dedication to duty and tradition. They had managed to be both relatable and royal, modern and traditional, ordinary people who had stepped into extraordinary roles without losing their essential humanity. Yet beneath the public narrative, William and Kate remained two people who had fallen in love and chosen each other despite the complications. In private moments, away from cameras and crowds, they were simply husband and wife, partners navigating life together. They shared inside jokes that made them laugh at formal events. They had quiet evenings at home, arguing about what to watch or discussing their children's latest adventures. They were more complex and more human than any public image could capture. The years had taught them both about the power of commitment, the importance of choosing each other daily, rather than relying on the initial spark of romantic love alone. They had learned to support each other's growth, to make space for individual interests and friendships while maintaining their bond. They had discovered that real love was less about grand gestures and more about showing up consistently, being present through mundane difficulties and unexpected joys alike. Kate sometimes reflected on how different her life had become from anything she could have imagined as a young woman. She had never sought fame or power, had never dreamed of marrying into royalty. Yet following her heart had led her to this unexpected place, this life of service and scrutiny, of privilege and constraint. She had lost things she valued, certainly, but she had also gained more than she could have anticipated. She had found purpose, had made a difference in ways large and small, had built a family she loved fiercely. William knew that without Kate, his life would have been fundamentally diminished. She had brought light into spaces that had felt dark, had helped him see possibilities he had not imagined, had given him the courage to be more fully himself, even within the rigid structures of royal life. She had transformed duty from burden into opportunity, had shown him that service could be joyful when undertaken with genuine commitment and shared with the right partner. As they looked toward the future, both William and Kate understood that greater challenges lay ahead. The crown would eventually pass to William, bringing with it responsibilities that would dwarf anything they had yet experienced. Kate would become queen consort, a role that would demand even more of her than she had already given. Their children would face their own struggles with identity and duty as they grew older. The path ahead was not easy, but they would walk it together as they had walked every path since that first meeting. The day that changed everything arrived without warning, as such days often do. William received the call late at night, his father's voice grave with news that sent shockwaves through the entire family. The health crisis that followed thrust William and Kate into roles they had known would someday be theirs, but had hoped would remain distant for years yet to come. Suddenly, the abstract future became concrete present, and the weight of the crown felt more real than it ever had before. Kate watched William struggle with grief and duty in equal measure. He had to be strong for the nation while processing his own loss and fear. He had to make decisions about matters of state while his heart ached with personal worry. She stood beside him through it all, offering private comfort while maintaining public composure, learning in real time what it meant to support someone carrying a burden too heavy for one person alone. The transition, when it came, happened with ceremonial precision that had been planned for decades. Yet no amount of planning could prepare William for the emotional reality of ascending to his destiny. The crown was placed upon his head in an ancient ritual, and in that moment he ceased to be merely himself, and became the embodiment of an institution stretching back over 1,000 years. The responsibility was crushing, the expectations impossible, the loneliness profound despite being surrounded by millions of subjects. Kate became queen consort, a title she had known would eventually be hers but which still felt surreal when it became reality. The woman who had once been an ordinary citizen now stood beside the king, her every action and word carrying weight and significance far beyond her individual self. She had to find ways to honor tradition, while bringing her own sensibility to a role that had been defined by countless women before her, each leaving their mark on what it meant to be queen. Their children, overnight, moved closer to the direct line of succession. The oldest, who had been growing up with some protection from the full weight of royal destiny, now understood with sudden clarity what his future held. Kate's heart broke watching her child process this reality, understanding that she could comfort but not shield him from a fate determined by birth. She and William worked to help their children navigate this transition, while managing their own overwhelming adjustment. The public looked to William and Kate for stability during uncertain times. The nation needed reassurance, needed to see continuity and competence, needed to believe that their new king and queen understood the responsibility they carried. William rose to the challenge, drawing on years of preparation and his deep sense of duty. Kate supported him publicly and privately, her presence beside him a visible symbol of partnership and shared commitment. Yet privately, in moments stolen from the relentless demands of their new roles, William sometimes faltered. The grief of loss combined with the weight of new responsibility threatened to overwhelm him. He had known this day would come, had prepared his entire life for it, yet nothing could truly prepare someone for the reality of wearing the crown. Kate held him during these moments, her strength becoming his strength, her faith in him unwavering even when his own faith wavered. Kate herself struggled more than she let anyone see. The scrutiny she had faced as Duchess intensified exponentially as Queen Consort. Every choice she made was analyzed, criticized, held up as either example or failure. The pressure to be perfect, to represent the nation flawlessly, to never show weakness or doubt, was exhausting in ways that left her depleted. She missed her parents with an ache that surprised her, wishing she could call them for advice the way she once had, though they remained supportive from their necessarily more distant position. William and Kate learned to lean on each other in new ways. The partnership that had sustained them through years of marriage became even more essential now. They made decisions together, talked through challenges late into the night, and found ways to preserve moments of normalcy for themselves and their children, despite living at the center of national attention. Their love, tested and strengthened through years together, became the foundation that made everything else possible. There came an evening, several months after the coronation, when William and Kate attended a formal state dinner. The event was magnificent, held in the same Westminster Abbey where they had married years before, though now serving a different ceremonial purpose. Dignitaries from around the world filled the ancient space, along with members of the British government, representatives from charitable organizations, and others whose work merited recognition. Kate wore a stunning gown, her bearing regal yet somehow still approachable. She had mastered the art of being queen, finding her own way within the role rather than trying to imitate those who came before. She moved through the receiving line with grace, making each guest feel truly seen despite the hundreds of people she would greet that evening. William watched her with admiration, marveling at how far they had both come from that first meeting, when they were simply two people drawn to each other by recognition of kindred spirits. The evening progressed with speeches and toasts, music and ceremony. William delivered remarks that struck the right balance between formality and warmth, speaking about duty, service, and the relationship between the monarchy and the people it served. He talked about the importance of tradition while acknowledging the need for evolution, about honoring the past while building the future. His words carried weight not because of his title alone, but because they came from genuine reflection on the role he now occupied. Later in the evening, during a brief quiet moment, William and Kate found themselves standing together near a window, much as they had stood years ago at their first meeting. The symmetry was not lost on either of them. They had traveled so far, transformed so much, yet in fundamental ways remained the same people who had connected across social divides and found something real and lasting. Kate looked out at the darkened gardens beyond the window, then turned to William with a soft smile. He met her eyes, and in that moment, something passed between them that no observer could fully understand. It was recognition of all they had been through together, acknowledgement of sacrifices made and challenges overcome, and renewed commitment to the path they had chosen. It was love, certainly, but also partnership, respect, and shared purpose that transcended individual desire. William, King of the United Kingdom, lowered his head in a gesture that might have seemed strange to anyone watching. It was not a bow of deference or formality, but something more personal and profound. It was acknowledgement of Kate's strength and sacrifice. It was gratitude for her presence in his life, for the ways she had challenged and supported him, for choosing him despite knowing the cost of that choice. It was recognition that his crown, heavy as it was, would have been unbearable without her beside him. Kate understood the gesture completely, as she understood so much about William without words. Her eyes filled with tears, she quickly blinked away, aware that even in this relatively private moment they were never truly alone, never free from observation. She reached out and took his hand, squeezing gently, conveying through touch what could not be spoken aloud in this public setting. They had built something remarkable together, these two people who had found each other against improbable odds. They had created a partnership that honored both tradition and progress, that balanced duty with humanity, that showed it was possible to be both royal and real. Their story would continue to unfold, bringing new challenges and unexpected joys, but they would face it all together, as they had faced everything since that first meeting by a window at Westminster Abbey. The evening continued around them, music and laughter filling the ancient space. William and Kate returned to their duties, greeting guests and fulfilling their roles with practiced grace. But something had shifted in that quiet moment, something subtle yet significant. They had renewed their commitment not just to each other but to the larger purpose their union served. They would continue forward, king and queen, husband and wife, two people who had chosen love despite its complications and had found within that choice something worth every sacrifice it demanded.